it's Michelle, Lone Star Leftist here. Today I am with Representative Chris Turner, who is one of my favorite representatives and also the one I vote for every single election. Representative Turner, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on your podcast. I appreciate everything you do in our community and helping people understand the legislative process better.
Yeah, absolutely. So legislative process, I know that's why you're here. We want to definitely talk about what's going on in the legislature, what we need to be looking out for, do we need to call our reps? So let's just start with, what are you focused on this legislative session?
Great. Well, thank you. So I've filed close to 40 bills this session. And they really run the gamut, covering a lot of different issues. So I won't go through all of them, but I'll highlight 2 or 3 areas. The first group of bills that I filed have to do with group homes. And group homes are facilities that provide care for individuals who have intellectual disability, IDD individuals, we often say. And these are important facilities that can do a lot of good. On the other hand, they're very lightly regulated. And we have learned of a lot of problems with respect to group homes. And tragically, we had a case in our district where a constituent's adult son was in a group home in Dallas and was shot and killed in his group home by one of the providers there. And that obviously is a horrific tragedy that never should have happened. And so working on that case and learning more about group homes, I filed 4 pieces of legislation. The first would ban firearms in group homes. And the other 3 would address different aspects of reforms in group homes. One would enhance background checks for caregivers. The second would call for the suspension of caregivers if they've been found to have committed a health or safety violation. And third, we would ban a horrible practice that I didn't even know was allowed, in which group homes, in some cases, have taken out life insurance policies on those that they care for. And I'm pleased to say that yeah, it's shocking. It's just amazing that was even allowed, but it is legal apparently, and we're trying to make it illegal. So I'm pleased to say that the last 3 bills I mentioned have been voted out of the Human Services Committee already. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to get those to the full House in the next few weeks and hopefully pass them out and send them to the Senate. The first bill, which we have called Joshua's Act in honor of the young man who lost his life, is still awaiting a hearing in committee. So we're hopeful we'll get a committee hearing on that here very, very soon. So that's one set of bills. Touch on a couple of other areas quickly. Filed legislation again to address worker misclassification. This is a real problem in the construction industry in Texas, where construction companies will classify their workers as independent contractors, as though they're consultants. And in so doing, they're able to deny certain benefits that an employee would get. Protections like a 40-hour work week, protections like time and a half for overtime work, health insurance benefits, et cetera. So that's something we're, again, trying to address. This is a bill that we got out of, we had on the House floor 2 years ago, was unfortunately voted down by the Republican majority. So we're trying again. And then the last area I'll touch on today, or at least at this moment, has to do with it's an issue that could be statewide, but it's in response to something that happened locally. And that is, I'm sure if your listeners and viewers are here locally, they experienced this. In December, right before Christmas, we had significant natural gas outages in our neighborhoods in Southeast Arlington and in Grand Prairie. And basically, Atmos Energy, which is our natural gas provider, failed to be able to deliver the natural gas that our neighbors needed to keep their homes warm, and in a 2-day period when it was really, really cold. It was about 12, 13 degrees outside. And so I filed 2 bills in response to that. I'm pleased to say both of those bills are going to be heard in the Energy Resources Committee on Monday afternoon. And we're working to hold Atmos accountable. And frankly, the bills do 2 pretty straightforward things. One says that if a natural gas utility fails to provide service to customers for a sustained period of time during a weather event like what happened in December, they're going to have to refund some money to the customers. And they're also going to have to pay a fine to the city in which it happens, because cities end up spending a lot of money out of pocket to deal with these natural gas outages. Secondly, is we want to provide some real oversight of natural gas utilities. And so we're going to give our bill would give the Railroad Commission power and authority to monitor pressure in natural gas utility lines to see that this kind of thing doesn't happen, or if it does, at the very least, we've got some sort of heads up instead of waiting until everybody realizes their heat isn't working.
Right.
And so I'm looking forward to presenting those bills on Monday and hopefully holding Atmos accountable.
So, I mean, to me, what it seems like is these are very common sense bills that, like, I would think you wouldn't have a lot of pushback on. But are you expecting any pushback on any of these?
Well, you would think. I agree that they are very common sense. The good news is I think on 3 of my 4 group home bills, we're seeing those move through the legislative process so far on a very bipartisan basis. The chair of the Human Services Committee is a pretty conservative Republican, but he worked with me to advance those bills, and I appreciate him for doing that. Any bill involving guns is controversial, unfortunately, in the Texas legislature. I think this is common sense. We don't allow guns in hospitals. We don't allow them in nursing homes. I view this as a loophole in the law that they are allowed in group homes. I'm just trying to close that loophole. But realistically, it mentions the word firearm. So yeah, that's automatically controversial for some of my colleagues. Again, the worker protection, we got that out of committee 2 years ago with bipartisan support, but it fell largely on not exclusively, but mostly a party line vote in the House 2 years ago. So I think that is a tougher one, but we're going to continue working on it. And on the energy ones, I'll know better after Monday, after I lay those bills out in committee. But I think what I'm going to say to my colleagues is I don't think any of us want to go without heat in our homes when it's really cold outside. A lot of us went through that during Winter Storm Uri 2 years ago. And I don't think any of your constituents, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or somewhere in between, want to experience that. So I don't think that should be a partisan issue. I think that should be a common sense issue. So I'm hopeful we can prevail upon my colleagues to recognize that as a common sense solution in that kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of your colleagues, they have been in the news, lots, Texas news and national news, especially this last couple of weeks because of their what I would call attacks on the transgender community, especially transgender youth and kids. They're trying to ban gender affirming care, ban drag shows, who knows what else. But where do you think that's going this legislative session? What are your thoughts on it? And do you see it having a path to the governor's desk?
This is an example, in my opinion, of where Republicans have some really misplaced priorities in Texas. Texas has the highest rate of uninsured in the country. Nearly 1 in 5 Texans lacks health insurance. We're about 43rd in the country on per pupil funding in the classroom. We need to give teachers a pay raise. We have a lot of infrastructure needs, and that's the kind of thing that I'd like to be focused on in the legislature. Instead, we're seeing a lot of focus, particularly in the Senate so far, on the issues that you described, and really attacking transgender Texans in a really hurtful and oftentimes hateful way. So I would hope that we don't waste time on this in the Texas House, but it has to be acknowledged that there was a committee hearing this last Monday that was focused on one of these bills. And you saw a lot of families come to testify to say, please don't do this to my family, don't do this to my children. And that bill is still pending in committee, is not advanced yet, but it certainly also does have a fair amount of support in the House. In fact, I think a majority of the House has already signed on as a co-author of the legislation. So I do think it's a real threat, and we just got to continue to fight back against this kind of divisive rhetoric that really, again, is not solving any problem, but is diverting our attention from the real challenges we face in our state, and is doing so at the expense of very vulnerable Texans.
And these are not ideals, or ideas that are representative of Texans in general. And I'm going to bring up TikTok, but we won't have that discussion. But on TikTok, what I've seen lately is people, from the LGBTQ community, people from the Black community, from, indigenous communities, crying tears, about their fears of not only what's going on in the Texas legislature, but in legislators all around the country, with these attacks on marginalized communities. And, from somebody who may not be as involved or may not, be aware of what's going on. What do you think the average person can do to fight back or stand up against, these type of attacks?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that it sounds simple and fundamental, but it is the most important thing. The average person needs to vote, and we just don't have enough Texans participate in our elections at all levels, but starting at the local level. And reminder, we have important local elections coming up here in a few weeks, in the first Saturday of May. But we don't have enough folks vote in primary elections and in November general elections, particularly if it's a non-presidential year. And because of that reason, and because our districts are so gerrymandered to where very few districts are competitive in the November election, and those elections by and large are decided in the primary election, that Republican members have only to answer to their Republican primary voters, who are much more conservative, and frankly, conservative is not even the right word anymore. It's just they're extreme. It's the MAGA extremism that we've seen infect the Republican Party over the last several years, and that's who they are accountable to. And so we need more people to participate in the electoral process to get those mainstream viewpoints into the electorate, and make elected officials of both parties be responsive to the needs of the mainstream. But I think that the average voter, the average constituent, the average Texan can ask their elected officials, why is our state still last in health insurance? Why is our state lagging in public education funding? Why are we lagging in some aspects of higher education funding and student financial aid? Why does the legislature not focus more on those challenges and less on time wasting in divisive policies like attacking transgender Texans, or you name it, so-called critical race theory, or banning books, or what bathroom people use, or banning abortion? Those are the things, and how do we, put more guns in more people's hands? Those are the things that the legislature, unfortunately, has wasted a lot of time on over the last few sessions, and seems to be continuing to do so this session to some extent.
Yeah. So vote early, vote often. That's our mantra. We stick to it. One other thing that I've, kind of been observing that I have a lot of questions about, that, concerns about maybe, is what's going on with ERCOT, what's going on with the PUC. They're doing a type of, I guess, like restructuring And you watch these committee hearings, they throw out acronym after acronym after acronym, and you're like, what are they talking about? And so for people that aren't watching, or for people that don't know what these acronyms mean, what is the state of electricity? What's going on with this restructuring, and where are we going forward from this?
Sure, yeah, and it's something I've been spending a lot of time on this session. I'm a member of the State Affairs Committee in the House, which is the committee that really all of the electric grid and electricity market legislation goes through. And so I'll try to summarize it as succinctly as I can, but it's very complex. And you're right, there's a lot of acronyms. There's PCM and DRRS and there's a whole alphabet soup of acronyms. But essentially, there's a couple big things going on. One, we know that the grid failed during Winter Storm Uri 2 years ago. And there were several reasons for that. The biggest reason was that the ERCOT and the Public Utility Commission had not demanded, and the Railroad Commission had not required key infrastructure to be weatherized. So we had electric generators that were not weatherized. We had natural gas wells and pipelines that were not weatherized. And so because a lot of our electric generation depends on natural gas to produce electricity, the electric generators didn't get the gas because the gas was frozen out in West Texas and wasn't moving through the equipment. And that's why the grid failed largely. So last session, there were some measures to address the need to better weatherize our electric generation equipment, and that the industry and the Public Utility Commission report to the legislature that has been done, that those facilities have been weatherized, although more improvements could be made. What was not done 2 years ago was requiring natural gas producers and pipelines to fully weatherize, to see that gas is able to continue to flow uninterrupted to those electric generation facilities. So that is still a real threat out there. But a lot of the debate right now is focused on the fact that apart from a Winter Storm Uri event, we still have needs in our electricity market in Texas. And the need is pretty simple. Our demand is growing as more people come to Texas. Texas topped 30 million people, according to the latest census numbers that just came out recently. And business continues to move here. Industry continues to grow in Texas. Those are all good things by and large, but it creates more demand on all of our resources, on our roads, our water, and yes, our electricity. Our electricity market in ERCOT, which covers most of Texas, is not adding generation at the rate that it should to keep up with that growth. Most people agree with that, and I tend to agree with that too. There are some that say they think everything's fine. I'm in the camp of I don't think everything's fine. I think we're going to need to add more generation. Right. The good news is we're adding more wind and solar in Texas. Texas has actually been a leader in wind energy over the last 15 years, which is great. We should be proud of that. But I think some people have taken the wrong, learning the wrong lesson here, which is saying that renewable energy is the problem because the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. Well, of course not. That's the nature of it. The point is to take advantage of it when the wind does blow and the sun does shine, and create cheap and clean electricity as a result. So do we need additional thermal generation? So thermal meaning natural gas, coal, or nuclear, but for all intents and purposes, we're talking about natural gas when we say that. No one's really building coal plants anymore. That's a good thing because they're dirty. And nuclear just takes a really long time to do. So we're talking about natural gas. Do we need more? Yes, I think we do need some more because we need to have both. We need to have some natural gas generation additional. We also need to continue to grow our renewable fleet. And so the question is, what is the best way to do that? The Public Utility Commission has a plan. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick hates their plan and is trying to do something else, and they're going to move something else out of the Senate, where basically the state would subsidize some private company to go and build electric generation. I don't think that is the right approach. So there's a variety of plans that are being discussed in the House. We heard some of those the other night in the State Affairs Committee in a hearing that went pretty late, and we'll continue talking about it. I'm not committed to one path right now. I think I want to learn a lot more about this because it's important we get this right and make the right decision. But I don't think it's accurate when people say we don't need to do anything. I think
right.
we need to do several things actually.
And as climate change is like bearing down our neck, I think it's obvious to everybody that we definitely do need cleaner energy, especially, going into summer. Who knows, it might be 120 degrees this summer, so we'll see. But
you're right. I mean, climate change is here, it's real, and we need to respond accordingly. Absolutely.
Okay. So I know we are getting short on time. I got one more quick question for you. What is the path looking like as far as cannabis this legislative session? Are we going to see reforms?
Yeah. Well, I hope we'll see some reforms this session, Michelle. There have been a lot of bills filed in the House, and I think some in the Senate. I think that there's some reasonably good chance that we could see something additional on medicinal use, maybe not full-blown medicinal marijuana, which I do support, but realistically, I don't know that can pass. But increasing the level of THC that is allowable to be prescribed for certain patients, or increasing the range of types of medical conditions for which that treatment is available. I think that is a possibility. There are several good bills filed by Representative Joe Moody from El Paso, a good friend of mine, to decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana. And I've supported his efforts on that in the past. And he's actually been able to get some of that legislation passed out of the House in the past. So I think it is quite realistic that could happen again, and the House could pass some fairly significant legislation. The challenge has been to this point in the Senate. The Senate has just really shown, when I say the Senate, I mean the Lieutenant Governor, really shown no interest in advancing that. So I don't know if has anything changed there. Has he changed his perspective? Is he willing to let that come up for a vote in the Senate? If he does, that would be tremendous progress in this front, because I think there'd be a lot of support. My guess is in the Senate, but I just don't know if that's going to happen.
Okay. All right. Well,
I hope it does.
I think a lot of people hope it does. Well, as always, I really do appreciate your insight. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And everybody, just make sure you pay attention to the legislative session. Call your representatives when you need to, and always vote.
Absolutely. Please vote in these local elections coming up in May. They're really important races for city council, school board, really, and in our case in Tarrant County College Board. So some really important races that impact our community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time, Representative Turner, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate everything you do.